Hey guys, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Like, share, and comment your thoughts on today's story. Also, what kind of stories do you want next? My name is Robert Hayes. I'm 67 years old, and for most of my life, people knew me as Robert from the corner store. Not businessman, not entrepreneur, not investor, just Robert. The man who opened Hayes Family Grocery every morning at 5:30 sharp and locked the doors every night after sunset. The man who carried old ladies' grocery bags to their cars. The man who gave neighborhood kids free popsicles during heat waves and let struggling parents pay their tabs a week late when times got hard. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was an honest one. And for 42 years, that little grocery store fed my family, paid our bills, and helped me raise my only son, Daniel. People look at success differently these days. They think success means luxury cars, expensive watches, or restaurants where nobody can pronounce the menu. But to me, success used to look like my wife smiling across the dinner table while Daniel laughed over spaghetti we could barely afford. That was enough for me. At least, I thought it was enough for him too. I still remember the first time Daniel stood behind the register with me. He couldn't have been older than 8. His tiny fingers barely reached the cash drawer, and every time customers handed him money, he looked at me nervously like he was handling explosives. "Dad," he whispered once, "what if I give the wrong change?" I smiled and placed my rough hand over his little one. "Then you fix it honestly," I told him. "That's all a man can do." Back then, he looked at me like I knew everything. Funny how life changes. By the time Daniel turned 16, he had grown taller than me. Smart kid. Sharp jawline like his mother. He carried himself with confidence I never had at that age. Teachers loved him. Girls noticed him. Customers at the store would shake their heads and say, "Robert, your boy's going places." And I believed them. God, I believed them. His mother, Linda, used to sit beside me after closing hours while we counted the register. "You know what scares me?" she once said softly. "What?" "That one day he'll grow up and realize we're ordinary people." I laughed back then. There's nothing wrong with ordinary. But Linda didn't laugh. She just stared at Daniel's stocking soup, cans across the aisle, and whispered something I didn't understand until years later. Not everybody believes that. When Daniel got accepted into one of the best business schools in the state, Linda cried harder than I'd ever seen before. We framed the acceptance letter and hung it beside the register in the store. Customers congratulated us for weeks, but behind the smiles and celebration was a truth nobody saw. We couldn't afford it. Not even close. That night after Daniel went to bed, Linda sat at the kitchen table with stacks of bills spread around her like battlefield casualties. "We'll figure it out," I told her. "How?" she asked quietly. I didn't answer immediately because I didn't have one. College tuition looked impossible to people like us. We weren't rich. We didn't have savings accounts hidden away or relatives with money. The grocery store survived month to month most years. But when you're a parent, impossible becomes negotiable. So I mortgaged the store. The same store my father built with his own hands. I remember signing those papers at the bank while Linda sat beside me silently crying. "Robert," the banker warned gently, "this is a big risk. I know, if the business slows down, it won't." But deep down, I was terrified, because that store wasn't just income. It was our entire life. Still, I signed, because Daniel had dreams bigger than Maple Street, and I wanted to believe dreams were worth sacrifices. The first year Daniel left for college, the house felt painfully quiet. Linda kept his bedroom exactly the same. Same posters, same trophies, same baseball glove hanging near the closet door. Every Sunday evening, Daniel called us. At first, he'd tell us stories about professors, parties, business classes, and city life. Linda would smile through every conversation like hearing his voice kept her breathing. But slowly, the calls became shorter, then less frequent, then rushed. "Sorry, Dad, I gotta run." "Busy week, Mom. Can I call you later?" Later usually never came. I noticed it before Linda did. Parents always notice first. One Christmas, Daniel came home wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery orders. Designer shoes, gold watch, expensive cologne that filled the house before he even walked fully inside. Linda hugged him tightly. "You're too skinny," she said immediately. Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Mom, everybody says that when someone leaves home." But during dinner that night, something felt different. Not wrong exactly, just distant, like he had already started becoming someone else. At one point, one of our regular customers stopped by to drop off a pie for the holidays. Old Mrs. Green. She'd known Daniel since he was a toddler. "Oh my goodness," she smiled warmly. "Look at you." "Still helping your daddy at the store?" Daniel forced a laugh. "No, not anymore." There was something in his tone that bothered me, embarrassment. Like she'd mistaken him for something smaller than what he believed he had become. Later that night, Linda noticed it too. "He's changing," she whispered beside me in bed. "He's growing up." "No," she said quietly. "He's pulling away." I told her she was overthinking. I wish she had been. 3 years later, Linda got sick, cancer, stage 4. Doctors spoke in careful voices after that. Everything became measured in treatments and percentages and time. Daniel came home when he heard the news, but even then, something about him felt distracted. Like his body was present, but his mind remained somewhere else entirely. That's when we first met Vanessa. She arrived at the hospital carrying expensive flowers and wearing sunglasses indoors. Beautiful woman, perfect makeup, perfect posture, perfect smile. She hugged Linda politely, kissed Daniel on the cheek, then glanced around the room like she was uncomfortable breathing the same hospital air as everyone else. Linda noticed everything. Mothers always do. After Vanessa stepped out to take a phone call, Linda looked at me weakly from her hospital bed. "She doesn't love him," she whispered. "Linda, she loves who she thinks he'll become." I didn't want to hear that, because Daniel looked happy, and dying people deserve peace, not arguments, so I said nothing. Linda passed away 6 months later. The night after the funeral, I sat alone in the grocery store long after closing time. The lights buzzed softly overhead while I stared at the empty aisles. 40 years old when Linda and I bought this place. 62 when I buried her. Life moves fast when you're busy surviving. Around midnight, Daniel came into the store. For a second, seeing him standing there brought me comfort, until he spoke. "Dad, Vanessa and I are thinking about investing in a restaurant someday." I blinked. "Someday?" "Yeah, high-end dining. Modern concept. Big city crowd." "Your mother died yesterday," I wanted to scream, but grief affects people differently, so instead I nodded quietly. "That sounds nice." He sat across from me near the register. "You know what Vanessa says?" He smiled slightly. "She says I was meant for bigger things than this place." I looked around the store. The faded shelves, the old coffee machine, the freezer that rattled too loudly. "This place paid for your education." "I know that." But his tone carried something else, not gratitude, tolerance. Like the store was an embarrassing chapter he wanted removed from his story. Over the next few years, Daniel and Vanessa became obsessed with status. You could see it in everything. The neighborhoods they visited, the friends they chose, the way Vanessa talked about networking and elite circles. When they got engaged, Vanessa's parents hosted a dinner at their country club. I wore my best suit. Still, the valet looked at me twice before taking my truck keys. Inside, people smiled politely but spoke to me like I was staff. Vanessa's father shook my hand, once then spent the evening talking about investments with everyone except me. At one point during dinner, someone asked what I did for a living. "I own a grocery store," I answered. The table went strangely quiet for 2 seconds. Not long, but long enough. Vanessa immediately jumped in. "It's adorable," she laughed lightly. "Very small-town charming." Adorable. 42 years of work reduced to adorable. Daniel said nothing. That hurt more than anything. Months later, Daniel approached me about the restaurant. "It's a real opportunity, Dad." "How much?" He hesitated. 80,000. I almost choked on my coffee. That's retirement money. It's an investment. Vanessa leaned forward quickly. You'd be helping build a family legacy. Funny word. Legacy. Because nobody talks about legacy when you're stocking canned beans at midnight to keep the lights on. But they talk about it constantly once expensive restaurants get involved. For weeks, I wrestled with the decision. Every memory of Linda haunted me, her sacrifices, her overtime shifts, her belief in Daniel. Finally, one evening, I opened the old lockbox hidden in my bedroom closet. Inside sat decades of savings. Money Linda and I built slowly, painfully. Money meant for security, for old age, for survival, and I gave almost all of it to Daniel. The day I handed him the check, he hugged me tightly. Thank you, Dad. For one brief moment, I felt needed again, important again. I should have known better. The restaurant became their entire world after that. Suddenly, Daniel was too busy for Sunday lunches, too busy for holidays, too busy to answer calls. But somehow never too busy to ask for more money. New furniture, kitchen upgrades, marketing campaigns, wine inventory. Every conversation felt transactional. And every time I noticed it, I told myself the same lie: he's just stressed. Then came the grand opening. God, that day still hurts to remember. I woke up excited, actually excited, like a child. I shaved carefully, ironed my shirt twice. Even bought a new navy tie because Daniel once told me it made me look classy. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for almost 20 minutes trying to look like someone who belonged at his son's fancy event. Because deep down, I already feared I didn't. An hour before I planned to leave, my phone rang. Vanessa. Robert, she said carefully. The tone immediately made my stomach tighten. What's wrong? Daniel thinks it may be better if you don't attend tonight. Silence. I honestly thought I misunderstood her. What? The restaurant has a very upscale image, she explained quickly. A lot of investors and critics are attending. We just think your background may not fit the atmosphere. Background. Such a clean word for humiliation. I gripped the kitchen counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My background paid for the restaurant. Another silence. Then her voice lowered. Please don't make this difficult. Difficult, like my existence itself embarrassed them. I see, I whispered. We'll celebrate privately later. But even while she said it, I knew she didn't mean it. After the call ended, I sat alone in my kitchen staring at the tie hanging around my neck. I looked ridiculous. A 67-year-old grocery store owner trying to dress like he belonged in his son's world. For the first time in my life, I felt ashamed of honest work. And that broke something inside me. That night, instead of attending the opening, I drove past the restaurant. Just once. Valet parking, luxury cars. Beautiful people laughing outside under glowing lights. And through the front window, I saw Daniel. Smiling, confident, successful, without me. I sat there for nearly 5 minutes gripping the steering wheel while memories flooded my mind. Teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, working double shifts to afford college books, holding Linda while she cried from chemotherapy pain, all of it, for this moment. A son ashamed of where he came from, I drove home silently, and for the first time in years I cried. Not loud, dramatic crying, just quiet heartbreak from a man realizing love alone doesn't guarantee respect. 3 weeks later, Daniel called in a panic. Dad, we're in trouble. Of course they were. Turns out expensive restaurants bleed money faster than pride can cover. Investors backed out. Payroll was overdue. The lease payments were crushing them. We need the expansion money. I stared at the phone calmly. What expansion money? The other 60,000 you promised. I closed my eyes slowly. Then asked the question that changed everything. Would the money fit your atmosphere? Dead silence, pure silence. Dad, no, let's talk honestly now. His breathing became shaky. It wasn't my idea. Of course it was. Cowards always blame someone else first. You agreed with it. I was trying to protect the image of the business. And I protected the reality of your life for 30 years. Silence again. Then finally, "I'm sorry." But it sounded terrified, not remorseful. There's a difference. For the first time in my life, I didn't rescue him immediately. And that terrified him more than losing the restaurant. Because people become addicted to sacrifice when they never have to earn it. The next morning, Vanessa called screaming. "You're ruining our future." "No," I answered calmly. "I'm refusing to finance disrespect." "You're being emotional." Funny thing about that word, emotional. People call you emotional whenever your pain becomes inconvenient for them. Over the following weeks, I learned more about their finances than I ever wanted to know. Designer furniture bought on credit, luxury vacations charged to business accounts, wine collections worth more than my truck. They weren't building a restaurant, they were building an image. And they expected me to fund it forever. One afternoon, I visited the restaurant quietly during lunch hours. Half the tables sat empty. Daniel looked exhausted, older somehow. Reality ages people fast. When he saw me, his face filled with relief. "Dad," I nodded toward the office. "Talk." Inside, he broke down completely. "I messed up." No arrogance, no excuses. Just exhaustion. "We can't keep up." I listened silently. Then he whispered something I'll never forget. "I think I became someone Mom wouldn't recognize." That sentence hit harder than anything else, because he was right. Linda would have been heartbroken. I looked at my son carefully. For the first time in years, I didn't see arrogance. I saw fear, and underneath that fear, shame. "I don't care about the restaurant anymore," he admitted quietly. "I care that you looked at me like a stranger." That almost broke me, almost, but pain had taught me something important by then. Love without boundaries destroys people. "I'll help you survive," I told him finally, "but I won't help you pretend anymore." He looked up slowly. "What does that mean?" "It means sell the BMW, cancel the luxury apartment, stop trying to impress people who disappear the second money gets tight." "And Vanessa," I paused. "That depends whether she loves you or your lifestyle." Turns out Linda had been right all along. 2 months later, Vanessa left. The restaurant closed shortly after, and Daniel hit rock bottom. Real rock bottom, not social media sadness, not temporary embarrassment, actual failure. He moved into a tiny apartment across town and started working as a manager for another restaurant chain just to survive. For nearly 6 months, we barely spoke. Not because we were angry. Because healing takes time. Then one Sunday morning, I heard knocking at my door. Daniel stood outside holding grocery bags. "What's this?" I asked. "Breakfast." I blinked. "You cook now," he laughed slightly. "I'm learning." That morning, we cooked together in silence. Eggs, toast, coffee, simple food, honest food. At one point, he looked around my kitchen quietly. "You know what's crazy?" "What?" "This used to embarrass me." I kept cooking. "And now it feels like home." That was the first real step back toward each other. Not money, not apologies. Humility. Over the next year, Daniel slowly rebuilt himself. Not financially, personally. He started helping at the grocery store on weekends again. At first, customers were shocked. "Look who's back," some teased him. Others judged him. But he stayed. One evening after closing, we sat outside the store watching the sunset over Maple Street. "I spent years trying to escape this place," he admitted, and all I really escaped was myself." I smiled slightly. "That happens to a lot of people." Then he looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Why didn't you give up on me?" That question haunted me, because honestly, part of me almost had. But parents are strange creatures. Even broken hearts keep loving. "Because your mother would have killed me," I answered softly. He laughed through tears. And for the first time in years, my son looked like my son again. Not the businessman, not the dreamer, not the stranger chasing status, just Daniel. Months later, he made a decision nobody expected. He bought into the grocery store, not to modernize it into some trendy market, not to turn it into a brand, just to keep it alive. Together, we repainted the walls, fixed the freezer, replaced the old sign. Nothing fancy, but honest. One afternoon, a young customer asked Daniel why he worked there if he used to own a fancy restaurant downtown. Daniel smiled calmly. Because I finally learned the difference between looking successful and being proud of your life. I heard him say it from the next aisle. And I nearly cried right there beside the canned vegetables. These days, life is quieter, simpler. Daniel visits every Sunday. Sometimes we fish together like we used to when he was little. Sometimes we just sit outside the store drinking coffee while neighborhood kids ride bikes down Maple Street. And every once in a while, I catch him looking around the grocery store differently. Not with embarrassment, with gratitude. Last week he handed me an envelope after closing. Inside was a check. "What's this?" I asked. "Paying you back. Son, you don't owe me." "Yes," he interrupted softly. "I do." I looked at the amount. $10,000, not enough to repay everything, but enough to mean something. Then he said the words I waited years to hear. "You built my whole life, Dad. I just got too selfish to see it." I folded the check slowly and placed it back in his hand. "Keep it. But no. Use it to build something real this time." His eyes filled with tears, and mine probably did too. Because after everything, the betrayal, the humiliation, the heartbreak, my son finally understood something priceless. A man should never be ashamed of the hands that built his future. And no amount of luxury can replace the people who loved you before you had anything at all.